Hey, what it do, YouTube? Welcome back to Q's Challengers Corner, where we go over everything NA Challengers, from news, updates, results, and you know what? We usually do some pick'ems too, which does mean since we are at that mid-season invitational point, we got ourselves a very special edition. This time around, we're going to go ahead and be doing our pick'ems, not just for the week, but for the entirety of our mid-season invitational, because it's actually going to be going over the course of 2 separate weeks. And just like usual, we are going to be doing some watch parties over here on the channel. I think just about every day. I got to kind of double check with my personal casting schedule, but we should be watching most of those over here, just like we've been doing all season long. So if you're looking for a cool place to kind of kick it, hang out and watch some NA Challengers, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn those notifications on. But let's go ahead and get down to some pick'ems here, and I'm really excited about it. Now, I do think the first round here, as far as we talk off that kickoff round that's going to be going on the next 2 days, I think it mostly goes the way that we're expecting it to, right? I do think that M80 is going to be able to walk away with a very firm and easy win over Disguise. I think TSM beats Moist Moguls, although I do believe Moist Moguls, just like TSM, have gotten progressively better throughout the course of this season. I just think TSM is going to be turning some heads actually during the course of the tournament as a whole. When we talk about our next games down here in that bottom half of the bracket, the Guard versus FaZe Clan. I know the Guard stumbled a little bit in the midseason. I am expecting them to come back with a vengeance. They have been doing that at least since that loss. I think they keep that pace up, especially against FaZe Clan, who has shown some weaknesses throughout the course of this season. So I'm going to take the Guard there. Now, as far as in the bottom half, Oxygen Esports G2. I do think Oxygen has looked great at some points throughout the course of the season. I just don't think they got what it takes to be able to take G2 Esports. So we're going to go ahead and pick them there. Now, before we start getting into this lower bracket here, let's actually talk about some of these upper bracket semifinals matchups. That way we can kind of cruise through the lower bracket from there. All right. Now, we do have to keep in mind, as far as for this TSM versus M80 matchup, they did face off against one another in week 2. And even though it was a 2-0 victory for M80, it was pretty close. I mean, on Haven, it did go a little bit of extra distance. It was 14-12. In favor of M80. And I think what we saw was a little bit of a collapse of the mental from TSM on that onto Ascent. I also think M80 is very, very strong on Ascent as well. So that's kind of what really caused that 2-0 sweep. But TSM, as I had mentioned earlier, they've gotten progressively better throughout the course of the season. And I do think they're going to get themselves a little bit of redemption. I think this is going to be a banger of a matchup, but I'm going to take TSM over M80. As far as in the bottom half of the bracket here, I would love to go ahead and say that you guys are going to see yourselves another upset. I just don't think I can roll with that. I think the Guard shows why most people were expecting them to be the best team in NA Challengers heading into the season. Now let's go into our lower bracket games here real quick, kind of get caught up on things. Unfortunately, there are going to be a couple of teams over the course of this tournament. They aren't going to be able to walk away with a session win. Maybe they win themselves a map or two, but unfortunately, they're going to lose 2 straight matchups. And I do think the first team that's going to do that is Disguise. I think Moist has just gotten themselves, like I said earlier, better throughout the course of the season, especially since their acquisition into the Moist organization. I think they end up walking away with the dub, and they'll be facing off against G2 in that losers round 2. Now, as far as that FaZe matchup versus Oxygen, I think it'd be very easy to say that Oxygen would walk away with a dub here, especially seeing as these two teams faced off against one another in that week 4, and it was 2-0. And even though I would like to give FaZe some credit, as they have gotten better throughout the course of the season, they've just shown weaknesses at too many points in the season. So I do think they also walk away with a big fat L, and that's going to be Oxygen Esports moving on in that second round. Now, as far as for the upper bracket final here, that's going to be TSM versus the Guard. Now, we do have to remember that TSM is actually the team that handed the Guard their only loss, and that was in week number 3 on both Lotus and Pearl. They looked really good. They did go the distance on Pearl. They actually went into some overtime rounds. That thing went 16-18. I do think, though, I think TSM repeats that. I think it's going to be a little bit closer. I don't think it ends in a sweep, but I do think that TSM is going to turn some heads, and they're going to beat both M80 and the Guard in back-to-back matchups. Now, it's going to be interesting because that actually puts the Guard and M80 now both in that lower bracket. Down there with them also going to be G2, right? And G2 versus Moist is going to be that first matchup here. I do think that G2 Esports beats Moist Moguls. I think that's going to be a closer matchup than most people are giving them credit for, but I think it's going to be exactly how we expect it. As far as also Oxygen and M80, I think M80 just looks really, really good. I think TSM just happens to have their number. That's why M80's in this lower bracket. But I think M80 is one of those teams that really does good, especially against those teams with a little bit less experience. And they're going to show that in the lower bracket here. And that's actually going to be why they're going to be the team that takes out G2 as well, which is going to give us the guard versus M80 in our lower bracket final. I think a matchup that most people would have expected to be the grand final here. So I do think, as much as I would like to say that the guard would be able to go back to back in their matchups versus M80, I think M80 is going to have a point to prove. I think they take down the guard. I think they look for redemption against TSM in that grand final. However, I want y'all to consider something for me for just a moment, would you? You have to remember that grand final, it's going to be a best of 5, right? So that means each team only has to ban out one map. And I do think that TSM ends up banning Ascent, which leaves them with, in my opinion, a slightly stronger map pool than M80. I do think M80 is one of those teams that they always look very, very good against lower competition. Whereas for TSM, they have this very bad habit of playing to their competition's level. So they don't look the greatest in those games that you expect them to. A la, like Mad Lions, as well as Disguise to wrap up their season. But I do think TSM ends up winning a banger series here in this matchup against M80. And they're going to walk away with that dub in the mid-season invitational. Of course, it's important to realize this isn't that spot that gets them up into the VCT, right? This isn't their invite up into Ascension or anything like that. This just gets them those points that are very, very important throughout the course of the season to try to get their chance into Ascension, right? Now, again, if y'all are looking for a cool place to kind of keep up with these games as they progress over the course of the next 2 weeks, definitely make sure y'all stop over here. And we're going to be live. I think they start right around 4 p.m. most days. We'll be live over here for that, all right? Also, don't forget, man, if y'all are looking for a cool place to keep up with more Valorant news, updates, stuff like that, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn those notifications on. That way we can catch y'all right back here. All right. Until we do catch y'all back over here, man, I need y'all to do me a favor. With everything crazy going on in the world today, be true, be you, be sincere, game hard and love harder. All right, y'all. It's your boy Q, signing out.
If you ain't show something, you just don't wanna be. You wanna be me, but you will never be as fresh as see you.